this time? Classroom?
It will be. Not yet.
Okay.
All right, anytime you guys are ready.
All right, my name is Ada Erdahl.
I'm Emma Hennick.
My name is Darman Ali,
I'm Sarah Smith.
and today we will be presenting to you about our topic, mental health and ending mental health stigma.
Our driving question is how can we prevent stigmas against mental illnesses in teenagers?
And then some of our learning targets is that you will understand what mental illnesses are, understand the stigmas that surround different mental illnesses, and that you will know how to combat stigmas after we're done.
So some key vocab for our presentation starts off with mental illness, which is defined as the range of conditions affecting your mood, thinking, and behavior. So pretty much anything that goes on in your brain that impacts like how you view the world or your senses or things like that. Mental health is a state of physical well-being.
Stigma is defined as a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or a person.
And then bipolar disorder is a mental illness that's characterized by episodes of extreme depression or mania that range way beyond what normal emotions people feel.
Schizophrenia is the breakdown between rational thought, emotion, and behavior. So you have a faulty perception and you like have a withdrawal from reality into delusion. So that line between what's real and what isn't becomes blurred. And it's not necessarily hearing voices, even though that's commonly associated with schizophrenia. That's not what it is. OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder is uncontrollable repeated behaviors.
PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental health condition that's triggered by a terrifying event, either experiencing it or witnessing it.
And then anxiety, depression, and depression disorders are different disorders. Anxiety disorders are mental health disorders that are associated or characterized by worry, anxiety over fear that can interfere with the way that you go throughout your day. And depression disorders are characterized by long-lasting sadness or feelings of worthlessness that also create a lack of desire to be a part of things that you used to care about or really enjoyed.
Alright, so some statistics are that 1 in 5 teens experience depression or other mood disorders. So just like based on this graphic, like if you take the size of our classroom, that's like a solid handful, a solid table of us, which is pretty crazy.
About 30% of men and women who have spent time in war zones experience PTSD.
Over 50% of adults with mental illnesses report receiving no treatment at all.
And comparing like our community globally and nationally, there was a study done that measured adults and youth on the prevalence of mental illness and the measures that states have taken to prevent them. And Minnesota in 2011 was marked 12th, and then we moved up to 5th in 2014 in the study ranked among all the states, which shows that we're already pretty strong caring about mental illness and laws that are passed, but that we're still improving, and that's a really good thing that's happening in Minnesota. Nationally, only 25% of adults that struggle with mental illness feel accepted, which show that accepted and cared about because of their mental illness, which shows that 25% of adults feel like they're experiencing stigma or lack of care, and that's not good on a national level. And then globally, 45% of countries don't have any policy regarding mental health, like at all. 30% have no programs that are there to help people, and 25% of countries in the world don't have any legislation or laws passed to try to protect people with mental illnesses.
So some facts to help understanding are bipolar disorder.
Bipolar disorder is equally common in males and females, but females are more likely to be diagnosed due to the male stigma surrounding emotions.
Schizophrenia affects men and women from all races, cultures, and religions in every corner of the world. Alright, here we go. So the two extreme moods associated with bipolar disorder are mania and depression. And so it gets its polar, the end part, because they're completely opposites on like the emotion scale. And the bi is because there's two. So like you can see there's like a normal range of emotions, and it's normal to feel a little sad or feel a little happy. But with bipolar disorder, it's more uncontrollable and it's a lot, and often the depression is more prevalent than the mania, but they exist in states kind of cycling back and forth.
One of our key concepts of mental health is that there's a stigma about talking about mental illnesses. So many people feel like they can't get help, or there's no one there to support them just because it's not an okay thing to talk about in society, and that's something that is important to try to change.
A prevalent stigma against mental illnesses is stigma against getting help, and most people don't want to get help because they're afraid of being seen as broken, damaged, or crazy.
Our final key concept is having a self-stigma against yourself because of your mental illness. So a self-stigma is when you believe that you are damaged, like mentally, because of your mental illness, and people usually have self-stigmas because they blame themselves for having their mental illness, which isn't completely true.
Some organizations that we found that are actively working to provide resources and help people struggling with mental illnesses are here. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, that's a screenshot from their webpage. They have organized groups that are trying to talk to Congress members to try to protect laws about mental illnesses. They have a lot of resources for you to contact if you feel like you're struggling with mental illness, and they have a lot of great things happening on that website. There's also therapists that are there to help you. We interviewed Joey Collins, the second bullet point, and he's a great resource if you're wanting to talk to someone about something you're struggling with. And he is right here in Apple Valley, so that's easy. Mentalhealth.gov connects you to all these other organizations regarding every mental illness or places that you can go to ask for help. And then finally, endthestigmatoday.com is a website that is actively trying to teach people about stigmas about mental illnesses and trying to find ways to lessen them or stop them in society.
Awesome. So for one of our interviews, we interviewed Joey Collins, who's a licensed professional clinical counselor. So he's a therapist, and he works right in the Anchor Bank, right down 140th. So it's super close to Eastview and super convenient. He was really chill. Like, we were all surprised by how nice and accepting he was right when we walked in the door. Some of the main stigmas he identified was definitely the stigma against getting help. Like, why do you need to see someone? You must be crazy. What's going on with you? Like, the fact that you see a counselor doesn't necessarily mean there's something wrong, even though that's what a lot of people think. He wanted to make sure you guys know that it's not just like sitting on the couch and how does this make you feel, or tell me about your childhood. It's really, he's trying to connect with you, and he's trying to give you a safe space to process things, and a lot of the times he says it doesn't even feel like therapy. So the stigmas are very real but very uncalled for.
Another person we interviewed was Ann Sholin. She's an Eastview counselor. She has last names P through S, and she does app at 11. She said that depression and anxiety are the most common within our school, and she doesn't see stigmas as often with students as she does parents, because the parents tend to think that there's something wrong with their child when there clearly isn't. And she said to prevent stigmas, it would be best to just be open about your mental illnesses, because the more people are open about their mental illnesses and are willing to talk about them, the more it becomes normalized and it's just seen every day.
So some ways we can overcome stigmas is having an open mind. So make sure you know your facts before stating your opinion, and educate yourself. So once again, knowing your facts and just informing yourself. Ask questions and start conversations, and with asking questions, make sure to be polite, because some people might get offended by the things you might say, and speaking out. So just publicly speak about one's feelings that normally they wouldn't express themselves.
We found a couple apps that are offered, at least on the iPhone, to help people that are struggling with mental illness. The first one over there is called Sibley, and it's a really cool app because it's kind of like texting, and it connects you with real healthcare professionals so that you can talk to them about things that you might be struggling with and anything else that you might be worried about, and they can connect you with resources. And the app is free to download, but you unfortunately have to pay to get connected with a healthcare professional. And then the other app we found was What's Up, and it is a free app, and it's got, these are some screenshots from the app. It has a lot of different strategies for people to deal with mental illnesses. They've got things that can help you ground yourself, or a journal that you can keep, and then they also have a lot of information about different mental illnesses and what to do to help yourself.
Alright, so we took a small survey around uncontrollable repeated behavior, which is correct, because OCD is an anxiety disorder based on, that makes these uncontrollable repeated behaviors happen. As you can see, obviously the right answers increase with age as a general trend. It's not the blue, it's not liking things a certain way, and it's not the orange, it's not perfectionism, it's actually an anxiety disorder. So it's not like, you know, liking your room neat or liking to have your nails trimmed, like it's this. And some people also bubbled all of the above, but and you can also see it's more prevalent to get the right answer in girls than boys at Eastview, but it's still pretty common to choose wrong answers and to be misinformed about what OCD is. He also asked about what schizophrenia is, and the right answer is once again in green. It's impaired mental function, right? The breakdown between reality and non-reality. And hearing voices was a pretty common answer, and in most cases almost as commonly chosen as impaired mental function. But hearing voices isn't necessarily the definition of schizophrenia. Once again, you can see with age, the right answers do increase, except for some reason in 12th grade, the 11th graders were a little more knowledgeable about this. So the correct answers are common, but as you can see, there's still a lot of misinformation and people not understanding, because hallucinating is these orange columns, and some people even bubbled all of the above. So
From our surveys, we learned that people who are currently suffering with a mental illness got most of the questions right. People who have previously had a mental illness but no longer have one were second at getting them right. And people who have never experienced a mental illness got majority of the questions wrong. And from this, we concluded that with experience comes knowledge.
And now to compare Eastview to Minnesota results. Minnesota only had data for 9th and 11th graders, so that's what we have our data with. In Eastview, this question that we asked was if you have ever struggled with a mental illness. And Eastview is the dark blue color. And on the whole, our survey results showed that the Eastview percentages were higher than the state percentages. But it's important to remember that our data wasn't totally conclusive because we only asked a couple classrooms. So obviously, not 100% of 11th grade boys struggle with mental illness, but the 4 that we ended up asking in our surveys did. And this shows that even as you get older, you're more likely to struggle with mental illnesses.
So the first current event article that I'll be sharing with you today is titled British Asians Challenge the Stigma of Mental Illness. This article took place in Leicester in England, and in this city there's a community of British Asians who have this culture of sharam, which means shame, and this culture surrounds mental illnesses. So for people who deal with mental illnesses, it puts their family to shame. And so there's a group of British Asians who were protesting against these mental illnesses and the stigma surrounding them.
Another article we read was most common crimes are wrongly linked to mental illnesses. And this article basically touches on one of the biggest stigmas against mental illness, which is violence. And really only 4% of interpersonal violence is linked to mental illness. But the article says that news stories tend to exaggerate that, and they tend to say that 40% of violence is connected to mental illness, which is clearly not true.
Alright, so some determinants that we found for developing a mental illness or for developing a stigma against mental illnesses are sexual orientation, so if you identify as not cis and not heterosexual, and academic pressure, right, you all feel the pressure to take an honors class or to do extracurriculars or to join clubs, to pump up your resume. So that academic pressure is also a determinant for developing a mental illness. A lack of safe social interactions, right? If you don't feel like there's a place where you can just chat about your homework or talk about your day. Or lack of social support. If you don't feel like there's someone you can go to if you're having a really tough time, or if you're really struggling, if you don't have that social support, that can be another reason that a mental illness could develop